Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Selling Greenville, your favorite real estate podcast here in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm your host, as always, Stan McCune, realtor right here in Greenville, and you can find all of my contact information in the show notes. You need to reach out to me for any of your real estate needs. And please, if you like this content, like, rate, review, subscribe, all of those good things. Make sure you don't miss future episodes, especially if you're on YouTube. We need to smash that little like button. It's really simple to do. Please just do that. I'd love it. If you leave a comment, I'll try to respond. Please do that. Now, if you're listening or watching, you'll notice there are some things that are different. This is not going to be the norm, but I am recording this from my truck. That's because I'm on my way back from a 40th birthday trip where I did a hiking trip out west, 50 miles in 5 days, a lot of elevation gain. It was a ton of fun. I'm on my way back. And I want to get you guys the content that you guys are used to. I always release this podcast on Wednesday mornings, and that's not going to change just because I was on vacation. So I hope you guys are okay with the fact that I'm wearing a Bryce Canyon hat, that I'm recording this from my truck, and that I'm using my Beats Fits Pros instead of professional recording software like I typically do. What we have some important stuff to get into in terms of monthly indicators. And I'm going to keep this episode relatively brief. Okay. And I've got a Starbucks coffee here. Originally, I was going to record this from Starbucks, but the music was outrageously loud. I don't know how you're supposed to think inside of there while they're just blasting music. So there was no way I could record this podcast anywhere near the building. So in the truck it is. So I'm going to take a gulp of my Americano. And let's jump right into the data. So in Greenville, this episode, as we look back at January 2026, is basically a look at what happens in Greenville when you have two winter events over 2 weekends in the same month. Okay. And that's going to be the story of this entire episode. New listings data, despite the fact that we had two winter storms, okay, two winter storms over the course of 2 weeks that shut us down in January, we still had positive year-over-year new listings data. We were 3.7% above January 2025, which was 1908. January 26 was 1979 new listings. That tells me that it's looking like, even though December new listings was a little softer than what we had seen, the fact that January was still positive year over year, despite the 2 weekends, I think that means that we're going to have strong new listings data, at least in the early half of this year. Now, new listings are a little bit different than some of the other data from the standpoint of if a person's listing their house, they're going to list it, right? These winter storms, probably the first winter storm that we had didn't impact this data as much as the second one, right? The second one almost for sure had a direct impact on this. If I had to guess, January probably would have been 10% above January 2025 year over year had we not had those two storms. You never know. But in general, all of this is going to, what I'm anticipating is that all of these numbers are going to be lower for the month of January, and then we're going to have a big increase in the month of February. Again, pending sales, same thing. This is our first month in a long time we have negative pending sales data year over year. So January 26 was 1356, January 25 rather was 1356 pending sales. January 26 was 1347. So a slight decrease, almost break even, a 0.7% decrease year over year. That would have been in the positives had we not had those two winter storms. So here's what happens, again, when we have this kind of winter weather, it impacts your pending sales. You really need to consider what to do if you're trying to sell or buy a home and we get these sorts of weather events in the Greenville area, how that impacts your strategy. You know, I have a listing right now, it's under contract now. But it wasn't under contract when these storms hit, and there were some things I wanted to change up in the marketing, but I felt like it was disadvantageous to my client to do that before these storms were all kind of out of the system, right? because you change up the marketing, you get more buzz. That's exactly what you're wanting to do. But then if that just gets immediately destroyed because of winter weather, well, what have you done? You basically deflated the balloon. You basically destroyed the ability uh, for that marketing to actually take a hold and to have an impact, and you don't want that to happen. Closed sales really had a big impact, and no surprise. Again, two weekends got eliminated from the month, and so closed sales went down 8.9% year over year, 988 in 25, 900 closed sales in January 2026, and that is really the lowest number that of closed sales rather that we've had since 2023. And so that's again, when you have a month with this sort of winter weather, you can expect closings get delayed. If you're a realtor, you can expect you're gonna have to hold out a little bit longer, eat some ramen or something until that next commission check comes in or whatever kind of check that you get. Um, because this is not good, right? We haven't had too many negative months the past year. But and by far, this is the biggest negative month that we've had in a long, long time. Nothing to freak out about. This just means that February closed sales are probably going to be really, really strong. By the way, I need to go back to pending sales for a second. Um, it really looks like this data has been fixed once and for all. We've talked a lot about how this data gets revised. It seems like it's finally been fixed. Also, kudos to the multiple listing service, to Linda and her team here in Greenville. That the graph I talked about, the graph was off last month. I talked to Linda about that, and it appears from my perspective that this has been corrected since then. She ran it by me before they published it. It looked good to me, and so kudos to the multiple listing service team at the Greater Greenville Association of Realtors. Days on market until sale went up to the highest number that we've had since COVID, since 2020. And not the part of COVID that was crazy, and when things were selling quickly, the part of COVID when things were selling slow because nobody knew what was happening, right? March, April 2020, that period, that time frame. And so January it went to 67 days on market until sale. That's how long from the time you list a home until you can expect to go into contract, is what January looked like. A year ago, that was 61 days. That's a 9.8% increase. I expect that to fall back down dramatically when the February numbers come in. Because again, what we have going on here is it just took longer as a result of these winter storm events. Really hurt you. If you listed your home in the middle of January, these storms really, really hurt you. And there's no way to account for that. But again, maybe consider. I mean, I saw realtors listing homes during the storms, and me personally, anyone that came to me talking about these sorts of things, you know, trying to sell their home right before we had or trying to list their home right before this winter weather came in and whatnot. I'm trying to discourage that because you don't want to lose all the momentum of the initial first week or two of a listing. That's when you have all the momentum, and so people need to understand that, and and realtors specifically need to understand that and push back on their clients when their clients are insistent. Hey, we need to sell now, and maybe you do just need to list it and just let the chips fall where they may as far as the winter weather is concerned. But I personally don't think that's a great strategy. All that being said, one number that didn't go down was the median sales price because we had a 2.8% increase on the median sales price. This is the closest thing that we have to being able to look at how is the market appreciating. And so it's not perfect, right? This isn't exactly market appreciation, but it's a close metric of it. And so January of 2025, the median price was 305,000, and this past January, 313,500. So nearly a $10,000 increase year over year, 2.8% increase. We've been running some pretty strong increases year over year now for the past several months. After having been below 2% for quite some time, we've been mostly running above 2%, with the exception of December, which is weird things happen in December because of the holidays. All right, apologies to those listening. I just had a system glitch, and I lost internet there for a second. That killed everything that I was doing. And we're back though. So thank you for hanging in with me. But as I was saying, median sales price still went up 2.8% for the month of January year over year. So that is still, we're still seeing strong data, and I don't think the storms are going to have any impact on that. Average sales price also continues to go up. We haven't had a negative month in average sales price in quite some time. That went up 1.5% year over year. If you're interested in what the average sales price is, it's not my favorite metric, but it's 390,403. But if people ask me what is the average home selling for in Greenville, I'm going to tell them the median, 313,000. That is, generally speaking, the more accurate metric to go off of. Percent of list price received was flat year over year, 97.7%. January is normally the lowest month when it comes to percent of list price received. So if you're accepting an offer in January, oftentimes you're accepting at the bottom of the market from the standpoint of what people are going to give you. So just be prepared for that. There might be reasons for doing that, for accepting an offer. And I'm certainly not saying reject offers. Don't reject a good offer in the month of January. Please don't do that. But just understand, January is not exactly the peak month. It's really, from this standpoint, the bottom month. And again, even though this episode is loosely about how the winter storm impacted everything, it's not going to impact the percent of list price received. And so basically, if you listed your home for $100,000 in January and got it under contract and closed it all in the month of January, you got $97,700. Not accounting for seller concessions, like if you paid for buyer closing costs or buyer agent commissions, compensation, anything like that. Now, the Housing Affordability Index, which is something we talk about a good bit, has some positive revisions going on here, because we now are showing multiple months over 100, which is great. January was 102, which is exactly the same as it was in January 2025. This number does sometimes have big revisions because there's a lot of laggy data involved with this. Specifically, it takes into account median income levels. So as we get up-to-date median income data, that can result in some things being revised. So this is fantastic. This means that basically, when you factor in mortgage rates, when you factor in median incomes, when you factor in the cost of housing, the median household can now afford the median priced home. And there have been several stretches as recent as August of last year where they couldn't do that. And so this is what we want. We want this number to be over 100. And after these revisions, it has now been over 100 for 5 straight months. So that's great. I bemoan the fact that oftentimes we have been below 100. And if you look at the graph, you can see quite a few times when it's dipped below 100 in recent years. And we always want the median household to be able to afford the median priced home. Otherwise, there is no American dream, right? And so we want that here in Greenville. And it really helps. Mortgage rates have kind of remained in the low 6s. And they've even, after going up a little bit, they've come back down as a result of some of the inflation data that came in cooler than expected. And so I haven't checked. Let me check real quick here. I'm recording this on February 17th. Mortgage News Daily has the average 30-year fixed rate based on their aggregate at 6.04%. Solid number in comparison to what we've had in recent years. Inventory of homes for sale. This is another one that frequently needed to be revised, and I think that we finally have up-to-date good data. And January came in 24.5% higher than January 2025. So nearly 25% more homes on the market this January than last January. So if you're a buyer, that's fantastic. 5,241 homes on the market as opposed to 4,210 last year at this time. That's fantastic. That's what's keeping prices in check. That's if inventory were in the 3,000s, like it has been at different times, prices would be through the roofs right now because it's just a supply and demand thing. So this is supply. Supply has been going up, and that has helped to offset the constant demand that we have here in Greenville and help to keep prices from raising to the point where that housing affordability index would exceed 100 and become unaffordable. And so month supply, what happened with month supply? It went up a little bit, but that's been the case for a long time now. So it went from 3 months supply of inventory in January 25 to 3.5 months supply of inventory this past January. Now, half a month supply of inventory, that's a pretty big jump over the course of half a year. However, when you're looking at the actual numbers, that is less of a jump than what we've seen. Most of the months have been running recently 0.6 to 0.7 months higher than the previous year. So that's actually, in many ways, a pretty positive number. Really, we don't want month supply to jump dramatically. It would be good if we had a little more month supply of inventory to help, with affordability, but we don't want it to take these huge swings. We want it to gradually increase. And as I've been telling you guys, if we got to 4.5%, that would feel very buyer's market-esque. And for some people would like that, get excited about that. Some people wouldn't. And so, it kind of cuts both ways. But 3.5 months supply of inventory. Most people will tell you you want to get to 6 months. I've been telling you guys for a while now that and that's when it would flip to a buyer's market. I've been telling you guys for a while now, the dynamics are different. 4.5 months, because of all the new construction, 4.5 months is the number, in my opinion, that where it would completely feel like a buyer's market. And I stand by that. Now we're an entire month of inventory away from that. It would take a lot more inventory coming online for us to get. It would be over 6,000 units of inventory for sure, for us to feel that way. So at the moment, this number to me tells me that the market is definitely favoring sellers. Some mixed signals here and there, but at the moment, it's looking like the spring season is going to be a strong season for sellers. And again, these most recent numbers weren't impacted super dramatically by the storms. I'm curious to see what happens we just talked about inventory of homes for sale. I will be very curious to see what happens in February if we get a lot more inventory coming on, because the question is, how much did these storms impact supply versus demand? My assumption would be it impacted demand more than supply, in which case we could actually see inventory drop in the month of February. But that's just a guess. Again, this is I've never really tracked this data when we've had 2 winter events in the same month. It's just very, very unusual for Greenville to have that. So we'll just have to see exactly how that impacts things moving forward. But thank you guys for dealing with all of this, the way I look, the technical issues, all of that. Hopefully I'll be able to splice the 2 videos together that I recorded here. And hopefully the audio part of it doesn't sound too terrible either. But I appreciate all of you guys. Thank you for indulging this as I return back from the 40th birthday vacation that I had. Appreciate all you guys. All of my contact information is in the show notes. Please like, rate, review, subscribe, all of those good things. And we will talk to you guys next time.